Great, great. What's the district number?
House District 23.
23. Okay. So what are the big wins you saw this session, and what do you hope for next session? How's your campaign going?
I am incredibly grateful that our former congressman went before us and took every single victory that we had. Really. And he's a better speaker than I anyway, so I'll let that slide. More. That's it. I'll give you a couple wins just out of my committee. They might not necessarily make it across the finish line. We attacked artificial intelligence in elections and economic growth and technology, which has become my default committee. It's the, I was on information technology and chaired economic growth, and they pushed those two committees together because I was running basically every bill out of those two committees. So that was a big win. We kind of dug deep into how artificial intelligence is affecting our elections, and it's in many different ways. There are a lot of good things about artificial intelligence, but it's kind of like yin and yang. There's also a lot of bad things and ways to manipulate. And the way we went after it in this bill was, obviously you guys can tell they muddy the waters before elections. Media is all over the place, and they can be very deceptive and lie with headlines and things like that. But that also with where artificial intelligence has grown is in creating deep fakes, and you can make David Young look like he was in a certain place and black and white the photo and make it look really evil, and when he was nowhere near said place or whatever. And so what we were trying to do is say you can't do that, that there's heavy fines that the AG would enforce, keeping artificial intelligence out of voting machines and things like that. So I worked with ethics and elections on that, and made it out of the House. We got it out of committee and then off the House floor unanimously, but I think it might be dying a slow death in the Senate. It might be one of those hostages that's already shot. But again, that's kind of like it's part of the process.
We passed it.
We passed an artificial intelligence bill. Was it not a companion to yours?
I don't think so, because I don't think Kenoria moved my bill out of her committee. So.
Interesting.
So anyway.
What was your artificial intelligence?
I mean, it was very, very similar.
She must have rewritten it, or yeah.
No, we passed it a long, long time ago. Like a long time ago.
We need to be like this more
Yeah,
often.
we do.
Yeah, I've seen Bubba once in the last 3 weeks. Yeah, he's one of my reps.
Do you guys work in the same building?
Believe me, it seems like we don't.
Interesting.
Yeah. So anyway, I hope like God it does even remotely what I was pushing for, because I think that's honestly just a very tiny step of what we need to be doing and what we need to be tackling. So if that's really good news. I hope that is moving. Another one we worked on was workforce housing tax credits in my committee, and other than that, I can't think of.
What about RIFRA?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, you've had Steve Holt on your podcast. I think talking ad nauseum about that. So yeah, that's a big win too. Thanks for bringing that up. That's something that's been worked on for quite a while in the House, along with traffic cameras. We've got the bottle bill done. All these big, huge bills that have been like hanging around that Capitol for it seems like forever. With the trifecta, although we don't always get along, we've been able to kind of tackle those big issues and get them accomplished. So,
would you go ahead and explain to these guys what RIFRA is? I'm sure it's something that they would appreciate.
it's,
Filming you, Ray.
On the spot.
Then I'm putting David on the spot. Somebody else explain it.
So I'm not an attorney. I don't play one on TV either. But essentially, it puts a balancing test in for those folks that are using religion as a way, as a protection or defense. This came out of a peyote bill on the federal level back in the early 90s and passed the U.S. Congress almost unanimously by then Representative Chuck Schumer and then by Senator Ted Kennedy on the Senate side. And a later case decided that wasn't applicable to state law, and so a lot of states have been passing state RFRAs throughout the years, and a lot of blue states as well, including some of our neighbors. But they never got passed in Iowa, so we were able to get over the finish line. I'm not going to explain the legalese of it because I'm not an attorney, but yeah, the governor was able to sign that at a great event put on by the Family Leaders, so a great organization, and who their leader. I represent Dallas County, Urbandale, Woodward, Granger, and I have the 5 precincts of Grimes and Polk County, of which Bob Vanderplatz is a constituent. So I'll take a little credit for the family leader being in my district. But
Yeah, so it's the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and it gives your religious beliefs more status when it comes to a challenge, whether it's maybe medical freedom or freedom to not use somebody's pronouns because it's against your religion or something like that. That's the way I understand it.
yeah, it just puts a stricter scrutiny onto those defenses.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing is that governments can't force you to do something that violates your firmly held religious beliefs without a compelling state interest. I mean, there's sometimes a compelling state interest that, I mean, you might have a religion that says, you know, I'm only going to drive 20 miles an hour wherever I go for my religion. Well, there's a compelling state interest in public safety for you to not drive 20 miles an hour on an interstate. So they could override that. But there's no compelling state interest for you to use somebody's pronouns, right? So there's no compelling state interest for you to decorate a cake in a way that violates your firmly held beliefs. There's no compelling state interest in preventing you from praying while you're at work. So lacking that compelling state interest, the state can't force you to behave in a way that violates your firmly held religious beliefs. And that's the gist of RFRA. Not that the state can't make laws that might tamper your public religious displays, but that they have to have a solid reason for doing it that benefits the whole of society, if they do.
Fantastic. Yeah, so it's a big win for Iowa. Protect our religious freedoms.
The interesting thing about this issue is when it was passed at the federal level, sponsored by Chuck Schumer, it was very, very bipartisan. And a lot of states decided, well, we'll do one at the state level because of state government and what they think maybe is a compelling interest. And unfortunately, it was not bipartisan. And I think it really, really should have been. Unfortunately, this is one of those issues that got caught up in some false narratives, but I think in the end result, it will be proven that this is not a law that is out to get anybody.
Perfect. Dan, Representative Gelbach.
A couple more things. I know we have Sean, who works at Perry Middle School, High School, and we did some things in education and on the school safety side, and those are waiting to get across the finish line, but I think there's an agreement now. And one of those pieces is to arm teachers in school buildings. It's ability where they have to go to very strict training, even further than a police officer, to have a right to have a weapon in a school building. It also requires school districts with 8,000 or more folks enrolled to have a school resource officer on premises. And there's a separate bill on the infrastructure side to provide some funding for a pilot program, some extra funds for those school resource officers, and some make sure that the districts have a facility plan in place to address the issues. Perry High School, if you didn't know, has a rate. They have a system in place already to get that response really quickly, and they did have it up operating. It was just a really great, and we want to have that available in every school in Iowa. But we also want to make sure, seconds matter in these instances, and so if you have a resource officer, a campus monitor, even a staff member that's trained, that has to go through live fire training, that is equipped with a firearm on campus to be there. So that passed the House, and we're waiting for some final reconciliation on that with the Senate, which I think we're close to.
Good. That was a plank in Dallas County.
It was a plank.
I love it.
It was a plank.
Thank you for
Yes.
that. Yes.
And then, I've heard from our chairman, even, I know there's some negotiations behind the scenes even as we speak here about some final finish line things about a standards bill that will include some social studies standards on there, and to redo the Iowa standards, something I was heavily involved in as in my business, but also as a former recovering school board member, to put in different standards than the Common Core standards, which are a result of the National Governors Association years ago, a long history on that. But to make our standards robust and make sure that Iowa's doing the right things for our kids as far as standards go. So I think there's some movement on that. And And finally, on I think there's some movement too to reconcile some things on the reformation of our Regents universities and the DEI offices, and some of the recommendations that came out of a review over the interim on DEI, making sure that if they're going to offer an office of anything, name your poison or name your intersectional group, that it's available for all students, and that we have an equitable way to give every student opportunity to have support on those campuses, and we make sure those DEI offices are not funded and those positions aren't going to be funded in the future moving forward. So I think there's some good progress on that too here as we move forward. So you're going to see a lot of things happen in the next couple of weeks as we try to get out of there. The per diem runs out on Tuesday, but I go sleep in my own bed every night, so I don't really care about that. But it'll be a good ending to the session. I'm looking forward to getting out of there quickly and passing the tax cut and making sure that we can go get on the campaign trail here pretty quick and have a win for Iowa.
Yeah, definitely. How many days are left in the session? 2. Monday, Tuesday, okay, so there's not a lot of time. Not a lot of
So
time.
that'd be a fabulous question. What's that one issue that's still hanging out there that hasn't passed? It's this close, and everybody's nervous about it.
I would love to, if you said it was the What is a Woman bill, but I don't think that happened. What is it? I give up.
Well, okay, so for me, I'll go ahead and answer that. So one of my favorite bill, a personal bill that I filed, is a vaccination disclosure. So a lot of schools are lying to parents and kids about what Iowa law is regarding vaccinations. You do not have to get a shot to go to school. That's a lie. And so what my bill does is it just makes it so that a school on a student registration form has to disclose what Iowa law is regarding that, which prevents them from lying. And so it's a very simple bill. Nobody was opposed to it, and those House guys are sitting on it.
What's the
Hey,
deal?
hey, I
guys?
testified on
What's the
behalf of that
deal?
bill. I'd like to see it move.
Dan, what's the deal?
We passed it bipartisan out of the House Education Committee, so that's a leadership question, I guess. So we do
My
our
guess
part.
is it's a hostage.
A hostage.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Standings bill is the Christmas tree bill, where all the ornaments either get busted or hung on the tree neatly.
What happened to the What is a Woman bill? It passed the House, right?
Yeah.
Didn't it? Or it never went to the floor? It passed the Education Committee. So,
Yeah, so why did it die?
So we never got it over in the Senate. I assume it didn't pass the
We
first
would need
funnel.
Pat Grassley and Matt Winchell to sit here and tell you what happened, I guess, because that's, when it makes it out of
I mean,
committee and
let's
hits the
ask him.
calendar.
so everybody, should we call them?
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I don't think they'll answer.
over here from the
I
Capitol.
can tell you one issue, and Jeff Shipley ran the bill, but we still have gender identity in this Iowa Civil Rights Code, and that's going to be a hang-up for something like that too. So that's another issue that's been out there for a while, and we'll keep coming back to, I think.
And that's the big issue, that we put all these Band-Aids on that issue, but we still have the gender identity in the Civil Rights Code. And gender identity, as you know, is fluid from week to week, so I could be a man today and a woman tomorrow and a non-binary the next day and gender non-conforming the next day,
You don't have
etc.
enough hair to be a woman, so.
I could get a wig, some lipstick. So it's a challenge when we have that in the Civil Rights Code, when we're passing other laws that contradict that. Correct. Yeah, okay. So this is the part where we ask the audience for questions, and I've got the mic, and we're going to use the mic because it records better. So let's start over here. We've got a burning question. I'll try to move fast too. So here we go. What do you got?
Hey, Dan, quick question for you. You referenced superintendent who weighed in against the AEA bill. How did the superintendents from our two larger districts, West Des Moines and Waukee, weigh in on that bill? And also the school board members, how they weighed in?
I can speak for Waukee. West Des Moines doesn't cover Dallas County, that school district, but yeah, Brad Buck was sort of non-committal, I would say. I don't know, David and I have met with him.
But now he.
Yeah, it's kind of wonky, but there's the education services and media services, and the governor's original bill was supposed to go away because that's your property taxes. And one of our colleagues, Representative Seeger's gotten some hot water for some comments he made that got published in the Register. I'll just say this, the superintendents like the flexibility of having their own money and having the money that is allocated to them. When I was on the school board, there was $7 million that just passed right through. The money came and it went away. So now we're going to give that authority back to the superintendent. So I think most superintendents around the state, whether we heard from them in vocally or behind the scenes or secretly supportive of the AEA reform and just to have more control over the funds, especially their property tax dollars. I know that for Superintendent Mark Lane up in Woodward and Granger, he was concerned about some of they're unique in that district because they have the Woodward Resource Center and they have the Grandwood, and so he was concerned about some 28E agreements he had, and he was worried that if the Waukees left the Harlan AEA, that they would have trouble finding services as a rural district. So that, I know some of you guys have more rural districts, and that's probably some of the concerns you heard from your superintendents. I think from what I've heard from the Johnson superintendent too, who I've talked to as well, because I have a sliver of Johnson in my district, and from the Waukee superintendent, they were concerned about certain aspects, but I think I think any superintendent would appreciate that they could control more of their funding and have more transparency. That's what I was hearing, and I don't know, David, you've had conversations more with them too.
You asked the right guy that question, by the way. He's got kind of the beautiful mind going on over there. He understands education like no other.
In Van Meter, our superintendent loves the flexibility. Not just more money coming to do what they want to do with it, having the option too, because if there are some things that the AEAs are really, really good at, they can still use them, and so.
Surprised the Register didn't cover this.
Of course not. You have a question?
We'll send them the video.
No, you don't. Fantastic. Who else has a question? Okay, here we go. Say your name first, too.
I'm Scott Steelman. Just what were the details of the bottle bill?
The bottle bill was, what was that?
The bottle bill was a couple of years ago, and essentially it allowed the folks who take the cans in to keep an extra penny, hopefully incentivizing more of those redemption centers to open up. I don't know if you know this, but there are a whole lot of cans and bottles that don't get redeemed, and the money that you paid out when you bought that soda or bought that beer stays with the distributors if you don't redeem it. And so it doesn't hurt them to take a hit with another penny, staying with the places that are actually taking them back in, bagging them up, sending them back to you, getting them where they belong. So the big change, the big shift was leaving an extra cent with the redemption centers. And the second prong of that was making it so that, and more important, out in the cheap seats where there weren't the redemption centers, our grocery stores were taking those back in.
Yeah.
And some of the things that were coming in those cans and bottles. My Osceola Hy-Vee, I had a friend who worked there, and he said that somebody brought in a bag of cans, opened it up, dumped it out on the table to be counted, and a snake slithered out. They're selling food there.
Right.
They're selling food there. And so that was the other big prong of that was allowing those grocery stores and the Casey's where they have prepared food and whatnot to no longer have to take them back. But the redemption center's keeping a penny and the grocery store's not having to redeem them any longer.
And then the third piece of that is that I believe it's 2026, we will get a report back showing what's happened with the redemption rates. Has there been new redemption centers put up? And so that'll shed more truth on the situation as to did that extra handling fee actually improve the situation or not. And to the distributors' defense, anything that comes back into the state that's fraudulent, cans that are from outside the state, they have to pay out for those cans. So that's one part of it's a really interesting topic.
I think it'll be interesting when that study comes back too, because I think a lot of grocers and places that serve food have opted out of it, but the infrastructure to take cans back hasn't caught up. So it'll be interesting to see, and then if you're noticing the ditches filling with cans more or less, or, just kind of where we're at, like when that study hits.
We're gonna work our way this way. And say your name first.
Sure. Hi, I'm Patty Alexander, and I just would like to know what precautions or safety measures we have in place for the ESA, for our school choice bill. There was an article that, I don't want to say his name, but he's running for House, and he's a school board member in Urbandale, and he put out an article about Arizona, and there was some fraudulent activity for their school choice bill. So I just wanted to be assured that there were some safety measures that wouldn't happen here in Iowa.
Do you guys want?
I mean,
I spent a whole lot of time on this issue.
Yeah.
I love these guys who got elected and said they're excited to come in and have this be their first vote. Do you want to know how many times I've run a school choice bill? I mean, a ton. A lot of safety measures in place.
Excellent.
Just a ton. In fact, that's why we hired that third-party vendor to manage those expenditures, because they have built-in fraud protections. You have to be an approved vendor before ESA dollars can even be spent on tuition or on a tutoring therapy or on supplies. You have to be an approved vendor on that platform. You're vetted before you even get on there. Now, is there potential for fraud? Sure. And so if indeed it does happen, we've given authority to the Attorney General's office to prosecute that fraud. We have criminal penalties for fraud in Iowa code already, and it is classified as fraud. Additionally, if you are found to have committed fraud, knowingly committed fraud, you are never, ever, ever again eligible to receive an ESA. So there are a lot of safety checks in place there. We have for the non-public schools who are participating, we have the accreditation process to make sure that you're providing a quality education. So you can't even be an approved non-public school unless you've gone through that accreditation process to make sure that what you're giving to kids in way of education is a high quality education. So even on the quality side, there are steps in place. Not necessarily fraud, but it's a safety check on making sure that money is being spent to educate kiddos. So both from a legal standpoint, from an approved vendor standpoint, as well as from a quality product standpoint, there are safety measures that were built into that upfront. And again, that's why we use that third party vendor, so that they sort of had to police some of that at the outset, so that we didn't have to create a whole new bureaucracy to make that happen.
Okay, thank you.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did.
Okay. You got a question?
Yeah.
But
The governor, with your support, has been reducing the number of commissions and agencies, which results in the reduction number of state employees, which reduces the expense of government. Will that assist you in reducing taxes in the future?
So the state government redesign bill was slated by our LSA, our Legislative Services Agency, the fiscal side, to save over the course of the 4 years of implementation, $220 million?
Yes.
And I think that was a conservative estimate. And nobody's getting fired. It was all from attrition. And I think, I mean, can the woman on the panel speak to the gender balance of this issue?
Yes, please.
Changing it up so that our boards and commissions can actually be based on the expertise and the experience of people serving on those boards, rather than on a person's gender, which, oh, by the way, could shift today and tomorrow. Taking, my gosh, if I were denied a place on a board or a commission because there were too many women on it already, but I was the best candidate for the job, I would be put out.
Correct.
And all the men in the world should be as well.
yeah,
The best person should be doing that job.
Merit.
Not the person just because of the plumbing they have. So I was excited to get that done. I think that makes for more effective governance. I think streamlining those boards and commissions will make that process faster and easier, and we won't have to dig so deep for those expertise. It's hard to fill those boards and commissions. It is hard to get people to serve these days. And so I think reducing the size and scope of government, just from an efficiency standpoint and a participation standpoint, is going to be really good. But yeah, we're saving money. we're absolutely saving money, and in a time when workforce is an issue, we're reducing the need for some of those workforce issues across the board, and we're becoming more efficient and serving the folks in the state of Iowa better. Can you speak to, I don't know if one of you guys can speak to maybe a little more clearly, Director Paulson talked about the time that was saved in the switch over on the software for applying for those licenses. Does anybody remember the details of that?
He gave me a huge packet to read through about it. But no, I've visited with Director Paulson and just bringing the OCIO under the Department of Management and just streamlining, honestly, going after the mini swamp of, you know, state government in Iowa is essentially what it is. And were you saying that diversity, equity, inclusion doesn't work? Is that what you were saying? No, I'm just joking.
I don't know if you noticed the parts flying off of planes, but I think diversity, equity, and inclusion actually causes some safety issues for Americans.
It's a great idea to go after that waste and not fraud, but just cut the fat of, you know, what state government is.
I believe we'll be voting on Monday. You guys passed it on yesterday? Did you pass the boards and commissions bill in the Senate?
What is today?
Thursday.
Oh, jeez.
Wednesday,
Yes,
yeah.
we passed the boards and commissions bill yesterday.
Yesterday, yeah. So I think we're gonna have that over at the House side. I was talking to Jane Bloomingdale yesterday before I left. These all run together. So that's just gonna further just streamline the process, and you know, it started off with before last year with the Department of Health and Human Services, and Director Garcia has been a good job of consolidating that and realizing where there is attrition, where we can streamline those state positions. And so this bill will further do that and further set up the infrastructure in state government to make sure that, because we as Iowa, you guys all feel the grocery store and see it in inflation, and then we've tried to make sure on a state level that we put our spending in check too. And so I think we're just trying to model that for everyone else. And if you can just get all your state, your school boards and your city councils and counties to do that too on a local property tax level too, we'd all be in a good spot. So I'll leave it at that.
All right. Kelly?
Kelly Koch, Dallas. I had the pleasure, you guys don't know this about Amy Sinclair, of spending a weekend with her down in Yuma, Arizona on the border a year ago. And I need to tell you, when we were there, I was a little bit disappointed. I wanted a little bit more action, but it was quiet. We talked about avocados and the farming and some of the migration coming over for work and then back. Not so quiet anymore. And so my question and remarks, I would love to put pressure on Governor Reynolds to executive action, some sort of a fentanyl education task force bill. You know, we talk about all these things in public schools, and oh, by the way, I'm a public school advocate. My kids went to Valley and had a great experience. But our kids are being poisoned by fentanyl. So Amy, you would be the pro to answer that.
So I don't serve on public safety, judiciary. I don't serve on any committees anymore. But drugs are a huge issue. Trafficking in general, whether it's drug or human trafficking, that's probably the biggest issue of what's going on with not having a secure border, right? And those two are married. Those two are being done by the same bad folks coming across the border, right? Now I will tell you, and maybe you don't know this, and maybe I shouldn't say it out loud, but it's possible that after that one evening, a couple of us may have snuck into Mexico without passports and got back into the United States without a passport.
I heard that.
Just to see if we could, and you can.
And you can. Yeah.
I had my passport with me. I was terrified to get stuck in Mexico, and so I did take my passport. Anyway, yes, we are doing things, whether that's a task force, and we had a fentanyl, and I'm not going to be the one to speak to this, but you're on public safety, right?
I'm not, but we raised the penalty on selling or getting caught with it.
Yeah, right. And we've done a lot of work within human trafficking. The big thing I think that we've done, and somebody mentioned it, but let's tout it again. We passed a law that said Iowa's law enforcement will enforce federal immigration law, and if people are found to be here breaking the law and illegally in the state, we will send you back to where you came from. Yep, you know what? That might cost us some money in deportation, but it'll cost cost us a lot less than incarcerating those folks and dealing with the havoc that they bring in here with human and drug trafficking. Guys, it's necessary, it's essential, and that's the biggest thing we've done this year. I think it will be a huge deterrent to those folks coming in here and flaunting our laws and pretending that what we say doesn't matter. It matters. This is our state.
And the governor continues to send state troopers down to the border to help as well. I mean, so the red states are contributing. We're doing what's right. We're doing what our president could easily have done and should have been doing these past 4 years. So, yeah, I think we're doing it right in Iowa. We just need the federal delegation.
Yes, yeah, those are good comments, but I want to back up a little bit to Bud's comment on boards and commissions. We found that a lot of the boards and commissions were duplicative. Some hadn't met in a long time, and so why have those around? And so the savings that you can get there, we want to give back to the American people. We also, that was kind of the thought as well, with the state government reorganization and realignment. And then a third thing, which doesn't get as much chatter, but is important, is I'm on the Administrative Rules and Regulations Committee. And we meet and listen to those in the executive branch talk about the new rules coming out and why they're needed. Well, right now, we're going to do a review of every 5 years of all the rules and regulations. Some have really outlived themselves. They shouldn't be there anymore. One, because maybe technology has come and gone, which puts some of those rules and regs out of place, or for whatever reason. And so, you push back on some of those rules and regulations, the enforcement's gone because you don't need them anymore. And maybe some of those workers too, but we'll try to, we do that through attrition, maybe move them to some other agency to work on their rules. But we have that third or fourth, fifth branch, the regulatory bureaucracy out there. Some are very important. Some have just outlived their time and don't need to be there anymore. And that, by getting rid of those, brings freedom.
Thank you.
It's insanely important rules because it takes, we legislate, but then they take that piece of legislation and if they write rules wrong, which they do a lot, then we have to come back in the next legislative session, rewrite a bill, and be even more prescriptive. So a lot of times you're wondering, like, why the hell are these guys doing this again? That's sometimes why, and that's why rules is so important. It's a hard committee to be on. So good job, you, and good job.
Not every state has a rules committee, so we're really blessed to have that.
All right, well, we've got time for one more question, and I promised Darianne, is it Darianne? That she would be able to ask a question, so here we go. After that, we're gonna let our public officials that are running for office speak, and then we'll mingle and have a good time, so.
Thank you. I just have a question on what your guys' plan on is for the health system. My husband was murdered in 2022 at the hospital due to the COVID protocols. And so far, I've had nobody able to have contact with that is willing to help out as Iowans that were killed at the expense of the hospitals making profit off of the loved ones dying. Remdesivir, Oliver knows this. Remdesivir, they got payouts. Ventilators, they got payouts. They killed them to make money. So our health system is broken. We had no income forms consent. We were not given the right to try. I had no say in my daughter's 17-year-old that was in the hospital on her treatment, 0. She was saved by the grace of God by Benadryl because of a different thing in the hospital, but she survived. Picture your loved one on this shirt right here, because this is my husband. It could have happened to anybody across this country, because it did. And I need to know, what are we going to do as Iowans to protect us for the next round that's going to come our way?
That's a great question. Can anybody speak to that? It's a tough one.
I think you can't give just a free pass to hospitals and drug companies the next time they come asking when, an emergency like this hits. Everybody's going to have to be liable. You know, and I think that, you know, that may be where everybody tripped out of the gate, trying to figure out how we could attack a virus. You know, I'm just thinking off the top of my head.
Is there anything that can be done at a state level?
You know, so a lot of what you're talking about was precipitated because the federal government was doing exactly what you said. They were incentivizing treatments and disincentivizing others. We did have a bill this year in the Senate that was a right to try bill that allowed off-label and experimental use of drugs that were on trial by people who were terminal. And honestly, that's one of the first steps. I think another big step is, and we've done a little bit of this, but allowing folks to get out from under insurance companies and direct purchase their health care so that they're not subject to those false incentives related to drugs, so that they're not necessarily married to what the federal government through COVID was incentivizing. And so allowing people to self-pay rather than have to be a part of that system could help some people. I know it's really hard. Healthcare is so expensive anymore that's not necessarily going to be an option for everybody. I don't know that there's one single fix, but I think that there are a lot of ways that we can come at this that can give people the individual liberty they need in their own self-determination, unrelated to COVID or anything. But one of the first bills I got passed, and I was in the minority, was informed decision making on a healthcare issue. Ladies in the room, have you had a mammogram lately? When you get your mammogram report, there's a place that it tells you whether or not you have dense breast tissue.
Yes.
I got that passed because at 35 I had my first mammogram because my grandmother died in her 30s of breast cancer, and so I'm high risk, right? And so I'd gone in and I wasn't, this was supposed to be a baseline. I wasn't supposed to have another mammogram until I was 40. I was supposed to wait 5 years, and I got my report back and it says, we didn't find anything, but you need to come back in a year. Nobody told me why.
Right.
Nobody told me why. So what's wrong with me that I need to come back in a year rather than 5? This was supposed to be baseline. Turns out, I found out the next year when I went back in for that follow-up mammogram that it was because I have dense breast tissue. I wasn't told because the doctor didn't want to tell me because nobody told him he had to.
Right.
I don't want to tell doctors how to treat patients, but every patient has the right to know the underlying health conditions that might cause them additional issues. And having that informed decision making within healthcare was a huge step, and that was honestly the first bill I got passed, and I got it passed in the minority because it matters that much. You are exactly right. You should have been able to, your husband should have been able to be treated with alternative treatments if you had a doctor that was willing to do that. If you wanted to choose that, you should have been. Your husband should not have died because the hospital was incentivized to give him one treatment over another because that was a way to pay them. None of that should have happened. How can we fix it? If you have an idea, I'm sure all of us would take it. It is such a hard issue. This is not my area of expertise, so for me to sit here and say I have the answers, I don't. But we've got to start looking outside the box at ways that we can get at this that makes sense for people who have the means, motive, and opportunity to make their own decisions. And I think we just need to start doing more of that and standing up for our own individual rights. I think you guys are doing that to a large degree by being active in politics, because that's where it starts is by you bringing ideas to us that make sense for doing exactly what you're saying. And I don't want to dominate this conversation. That's just a hard question to answer because we're not experts and we don't have those answers unless people bring them to us.
I think there's a lot to be learned with what we all went through. Yeah. I guess for me, the word incentivize when it comes to certain treatments, it may be they're incentivized because they just work, and maybe there's no financial incentive behind a doctor or a hospital to put forth those procedures. We want to make sure that we have the ability to have full transparency as to why are you telling me I have to do this, and what are my rights and my ability to say no, that I want to try something else, that you should have those rights.
Thank you. That's a good question, and that's a fight that we're just going to have to continue fighting. And I want you guys to thank our legislators for coming out tonight. I mean, this is a great thing for us to have this dialogue with these guys and for in the same room on the same night. We really appreciate it so much. Thank you guys for coming out. And we're gonna
Thanks to you for hosting.
Yeah.